Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lynn Doyle. Welcome to this week's Meet the Doctors. We have a great lineup of doctors for you today to talk about the latest health news and medical breakthroughs and how they may impact you or a loved one. Please understand the medical advice given on this show is not intended for anyone individually, and that we always suggest you check with your doctor before making any medical decisions. Now for the latest headlines. Former President George W. Bush underwent his second partial knee replacement surgery in Chicago recently. This time, the surgery was on the 68-year-old's left knee. A Bush spokesman said the 43rd president was, quote, looking forward to getting back on his mountain bike in a few weeks, end quote. Now, you know he's not alone. An estimated 645,000 knee replacements were performed in 2011, according to the latest data from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. You have our best wishes for a speedy recovery, Mr. President. And now in other news about bone disease, there is now hope for a way to restore bone mass loss that affects more than 200 million people. A team of researchers at the University of Liverpool implanted neuromuscular stimulators inside the legs of rats, where they pulsed every 30 seconds for 28 days. This caused their shin muscles to contract, but it didn't impair the rats' movements. When the rats later underwent CT scans, they showed their bone density had increased by an impressive 30% to the treated area. The aronia berry is the newest antioxidant superfood to hit grocery shelves. It's now found in everything from powdered juices to baby food. Researchers say the aronia berry packs more of an antioxidant wallop than the ever-popular superfoods like blueberries or acai berries and goji berries. And to fuel the multi-million-dollar industry, it's even undergone a name change from the rather off-putting chokeberry to the much more appealing aronia berry, which, by the way, is derived from the Latin genus Aronia melanocarpa. I think that was a pretty good idea. Heavy coffee drinkers may have a lower risk of developing Parkinson's disease. Researchers at Linköping University in Sweden discovered that a combination of a very specific variation in the gene known as GRIN2A, found in people who drink a lot of coffee, appears to protect against developing the disease. Gluten-free dieters who are suspicious of the accuracy of menu ingredients will soon be able to enjoy their meal with a sort of digital taste tester. A San Francisco-based startup, Six Sensor Labs, is in the final stages of developing a portable sensor that can detect gluten in food. There's no word yet when it will become available to the public. A failing sense of smell might signal the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. An inexpensive, low-tech smell test could spot who needs more extensive screening for dementia, according to two separate studies. Amyloid plaques, a telltale sign of Alzheimer's, is being found in the area of the brain responsible for smell. And finally, Swiss drug maker Novartis and Google have agreed to develop smart contact lenses that would help diabetics track their blood glucose levels in tear fluid and then send that data wirelessly to a mobile device. The technology is potentially life-changing for many diabetics who now have to prick their fingers as many as 10 times daily to check their body's production of sugar. Diabetes, as you know, afflicts an estimated 382 million people worldwide. That's our latest news. Next up, our Newsmax contributor and noted cardiologist, Dr. Chauncey Crandall, will give us his take on the latest study on alcohol consumption. Should we raise a glass and toast? But first, coming up after our break, Newsmax Deputy Health Editor Nick Tate has the latest fat facts on why Americans are so obese. It may surprise you, but it's not all about the calories. Stay with us. Welcome back. Over the years, there have been so many contradicting studies over whether alcohol is good or bad for your health. Binge drinking is unquestionably bad, and one too many a day isn't good either. But what about a daily cocktail, a cold beer, or a nice chilled glass of wine? Sounds good to me. Well, Newsmax contributor and cardiologist Dr. Chauncey Crandall gives us his takeaway on this latest study and if it's okay to drink to our health.
Thank you, Lynn. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. You know, I have an innate curiosity about this drinking and these studies that are involving alcohol. Is it good for us or not?
Well, Lynn, there are some studies recently that point that this is probably a good thing for some people. It's not my first choice, but we do know that alcohol can have benefit in preventing serious heart issues.
So are we saying that alcohol could actually be preventative maintenance? It could actually ward off either a heart attack or heart disease?
Well, we now know, based on studies, that alcohol has benefits. It can decrease the clotting factor of the blood by decreasing platelets and a chemical called fibrinogen. And it also elevates good cholesterol called HDL. So these three things together reduce the incidence of heart disease because of alcohol use.
Let's clarify alcohol, because in the past we've heard that red wine drinking could be heart helpful. Are you talking about red wine here, or are you including other alcohols as well?
Well, this study includes all alcohols, Lynn, but red wine in particular has high antioxidants. It would be my first choice if I was to pursue, drinking alcohol.
It seems almost comical that doctors would now say, sure, go ahead and have a drink. But as always, I'm sure moderation is part of that advice as well.
Well, it's not that I'm recommending alcohol. There are other things that we can do to improve our risk against heart disease. But the studies do tell us, Lynn, that possibly a drink every other day will give benefit in reducing alcohol, but more than 4 to 6 drinks a week has no benefit.
Now, does that change for the sexes? Should I drink more or less than perhaps my husband?
Well, the American Cancer Society says that women can limit themselves to 1 drink a day and men 2. That is the maximum. I would recommend 1 drink every other day.
You said earlier that there are other things that we can do, so let's expand on that a little bit. We've talked about the alcohol and we've gotten your advice on that, but what else could we be doing to make ourselves heart healthy?
Well, the main thing, Lynn, is eating well. That is the #1 thing that will reduce heart disease. So eating a plant-based diet with the addition of possibly cold water fish and poultry would be #1. The second would be exercising an hour a day. I think that is very important, and walking is a great exercise for 1 hour. And the third would be maintaining ideal body weight, Lynn. That's very important. And fourth, of course, stopping our cigarettes and lowering our stress is very important for these people to reduce the risk of heart disease.
Let's expand on that exercise and eating correctly, because a lot of people feel like they're already too far gone. There's nothing that they could do, or they're not interested in exercising, or it's just too hard to fit it all in. What do you say to those folks?
Well, I would just say start small. Start on a 15-minute walk every day and then work your way up. You can do this. People need to understand that they're entitled to have victory in their body and in their health, but they must start. And the body, Lynn, is remarkable. It wants to return to normal. You just need to assist the body. So I would tell them, walk an hour a day, pursue the plant-based diet, and you're going to live a long life.
Sounds like great advice, but the best advice I think any cardiologist is going to give to our viewers is stop smoking if you are smoking right now.
Absolutely. That is the #1 thing to do.
So how do they do that? Because again, like the diet, like the exercise, people say, I've tried it in the past, I just can't do it, I just don't want to, I enjoy it. What do you say to them?
Well, smoking is very addictive. It's just like any other addiction. They must start and make a decision that they want to stop. They can get counseling through their physician service. They can go on some additional medications that help them withdraw from tobacco, but it can be done, Lynn. I've seen it over and over again. They need to make the first step and stop, and then they need to pursue that, and they will have victory.
And you mentioned stress Really? How do we get rid of stress in our lives?
Well, walking reduces stress, Lynn. You know, that is the number one stress reducer. If you walk in the morning, you lower the level of stress at the beginning of the day, and then as you accelerate throughout the day, the stress level will be lower. And the other thing is get a pet. A pet reduces stress.
Thank you, Dr. Crandall. So for those of you who are couch potatoes and need that nudge to get out on a bike or to walk instead of driving a few blocks, let's check in with Newsmax Deputy Health Editor Nick Tate on the latest study on obesity. It's literally a call to action. Nick?
Hey, Lynn. I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, but I'm really curious about this. I thought it was overeating that was making us fat, not just sitting around.
Well, you know, this is kind of a surprising finding. We've heard so much about, fat foods, no fat, what kind of diet you should eat. But in fact, the level of exercise you're getting is really the critical factor. The research found that over the last 20 years, the number of Americans who get no physical activity at all has jumped from between about 15 and 20% to over half. And that's the result. That's what the result of that is, that we're all getting heavier. At the same time, we're consuming just about the same amount of calories, just slightly more than we were eating 20 years ago. But the lack of activity is really the factor that's driving the nation's ever-expanding waistline.
Now, it's not just having an impact on our waistline and our weight. Not having enough exercise or not even just getting out and enjoying physical activity really can impact us both mentally and emotionally as well, right?
It can, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of connections between exercise and a lower risk for Alzheimer's disease, for dementia. And, obesity-related healthcare costs in this country amount to almost $150 billion a year. That's for physical as well as mental health issues. So, getting active, getting moving is really a very important part of staying healthy.
We've talked about this before, but people always come up with 1,000 excuses why they can't work physical activity into their daily lives. You and I have heard it. We're busy, we work too much, there's no time in the schedule, we have to take care of the kids, we have parents that need our assistance now. What do you say to those folks?
Well, I think you really need to take into account the fact that getting exercise needs to be on the same level as getting a good night's sleep.
One thing that I always try to do is to take the stairs whenever possible. Certainly not if I'm going to the 18th floor of the building, but whenever possible at the airport or the shopping mall or whatever it is, I just try to go up the stairs as opposed to getting on the escalator or the elevator. You think that's a good idea?
Very good idea. Just those simple steps, those simple extra steps, they really, really help. And the research that's done shows that you don't need to work out for 35 or 40 minutes at a time. 10 minutes here, housework, 10 minutes there, 5 minutes walking to the store or from work. They add up over your day, and if you're getting 30 to 40 minutes a day, even in those little increments, it counts and it helps.
And we've talked about the physical activity, but we need to say this in our final minute here, that really what you put into your body is as important as the kind of physical work that you're asking it to perform as well. I mean, diet is always important in keeping your good weight.
There's no question. I mean, what it really is, it's a balance. Your health is a balance of making sure that the calories that you're consuming, make them healthy, make them high nutrient calories, and make sure that you're burning enough calories in the day to burn them off. So, for most Americans, it's very, very simple. We need to move a little bit more. We need to eat a little bit less and eat a little bit better to get that balance right. But it is absolutely a mix of what we eat and how we move.
Well, with that said, I'm going to get up off this chair and go out and walk around. It's always good to hear from you. Thanks a lot, Nick. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll have more here on Your Health on Meet the Doctor. Stay with us. Chelation therapy has been the mainstream treatment to remove heavy lead and metal poisoning from the body. But now a leading cardiologist has claimed it helps prevent heart attack victims from suffering another possibly deadly one. Now, some critics have called the off-label use of chelation therapy as quackery, but leading researcher Dr. Obesity used to think so too. From naysayer to leading advocate, he's fighting a backlash from the medical community. We'll hear from him in a moment, but first, Newsmax Deputy Health Editor Nick Tate explains more.
Well, thanks, Lynn. You know, chelation therapy is one of those alternative treatments that non-traditional doctors and practitioners have been using for a long time, but it's largely been dismissed as fringe medicine quackery by conventional doctors and cardiologists who just don't believe that it has really been effective. But this groundbreaking new study has proven that, in fact, chelation therapy combined with high-dose vitamins can be very protective in preventing heart attacks in people who have already had a heart attack. Now, the new research was led by Dr. Gervasio Lamas, who is with the Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami, who himself was a skeptic about chelation therapy until he did this study. It has changed his mind in a big way, and now he is working to change the minds of other cardiologists and conventional doctors, and they're giving chelation therapy a second look as a primary way to treat heart disease.
Thanks, Nick. And Dr. Lamas is joining us now from our South Florida studio. Dr. Lamas, it's nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
What was it about the study that changed your mind and your viewpoint about chelation therapy?
Well, Lynn, I had a very traditional viewpoint about chelation therapy, and by traditional I mean that it was really not based on evidence. It was based on bias and what I had been taught by my professors. And I had always been taught that it was dangerous, it was quackery, and really that it was bunk. And I can tell you that I remember the day in 1999 when I decided that I needed to move forward and do a clinical trial to settle the question. It was a very nice but somewhat disheveled patient that looked a little bit like Lieutenant Columbo, walked into my office asking for chelation therapy, and I said, of course not, that's crazy. And then I realized that I did not have the data to be able to really say that with any degree of certainty.
So for those of us who
And so
don't
from
know
that day on,
what chelation therapy is, can you explain that?
sure, a chelating agent is a molecule that is best thought of as a baseball mitt. So it's a baseball mitt with a negative charge, so it's like a magnet in the shape of a baseball mitt. A metal ion, and we get metals from the environment, lead from leaded gasoline in the old days and so on, pops into that mitt, and that mitt wraps around it and allows the body to excrete it. And that chelating agent plus the metal that was chelated is detoxified and then excreted. So the molecule that we're talking about, the drug, is a drug called EDTA, the initials of a long and somewhat non-illustrative name. And that's what most chelation practitioners have been using.
So Dr. Lamas, how is chelation therapy actually administered?
Well, the chelation therapy that we used is administered intravenously, that is in the vein as an IV, and each IV took about 3 hours to administer. We asked our patients to take 40 IVs, one weekly for 30 weeks, and then another 10 that could be spread out a bit longer. So it is laborious.
Is it suitable for every patient who's either had a heart attack or who is at risk to have a heart attack?
I can't really tell you exactly what the broad scope of eligibility is. We studied patients who were at least 50 years of age and had had a prior heart attack and had reasonably good kidney function. So for those patients, we found benefit. Other studies will need to be done for us to really pin down what is the exact population that will benefit from this treatment.
So what's so controversial about it?
The controversy really was that they had been reporting positive results, but in their own journals or magazines, and the cardiologists really weren't listening. It wasn't done in proper scientific format. And conventional medicine has a strong aversion to alternative medicine practitioners. for reasons that are just too long to go into here, but the conventional physicians are suspicious of alternative medicine practitioners.
So what was it about the results that
2000
changed your mind?
Well, we reach, as a scientist, you have a point where you reach an epiphany, and that epiphany is based on data, on information. So I led really a 1,700 patient clinical trial in 134 sites throughout the US and Canada. Half of the patients received chelation, half of the patients received placebo, and at the end, we found that we reduced the number of heart attacks, strokes, bypasses, sort of the bad things that can happen to heart patients by about 18%. And when you add on oral vitamins, it was reduced by 26%. That's something that can have huge health implications nationally.
Then why hasn't it already been approved by the FDA, and why is it not being embraced by the traditional medical community?
Well, I'll answer the first question. To be fair, we are presenting this to the FDA later on this month, and we will see how they view the information and see where we go with it. The traditional medical community has the ability to respond much more quickly, and they initially responded with suspicion. Over time, by having a lot of exposure for these data and by publishing bits and pieces of it that are just so consistent, the overall view has turned from suspicion to interest and to the realization that there is something there. Because I've lived with this for so long, I really am somewhat farther ahead in the conversion process.
Okay.
I know that this works.
Well, I know that this is something that we're going to keep an eye on. I hope that you'll keep us updated, and thank you so much for sharing your perspective on it with us.
Lynn, thank you so much.
We'll take a short break, and we'll be back with the Meet the Doctors panels right after this. Thanks for joining us once again. I'm Lynn Doyle, and this is Meet the Doctors. This is one of my favorite parts of the show because you actually get to meet the doctors. You ask questions, and they give us their opinion and their answers. Let's meet this week's panelist. Dr. Peter Hibbert is a family physician and a member of the American College of Emergency Physicians. He's also a medical advice columnist for Newsmax magazine, and on newsmax.com, Ask the Doctor. He's joining us from our Florida studio. Here with me in New York is cardiologist Dr. Richard Stein of the NYU Langone Medical Center, along with Dr. Erica Schwartz, who is a leading authority on wellness prevention. Doctors, it's wonderful to have you all with us.
It's great to be here.
Are you ready to answer some questions?
Very exciting.
Great. Let's start with Dr. Hibbert. Last week, we talked a little bit about when a person is diagnosed as bipolar, and I know it's a very difficult subject to address in just a short amount of time, but can you tell us what it means when someone has been diagnosed as being bipolar?
In my experience, bipolar can be one of the most disturbing parts of someone's life. On the other hand, many bipolar patients aren't aware that they actually have it because it tends to have its onset in adulthood, in the late 20s, starting in the late 20s, and then extending on from there. So it's not often seen in childhood. So a lot of adults aren't tuned into thinking about this, and when they're married with young families, all of a sudden it seems like things aren't working right, or I've got this terrible attention deficit, I can't seem to focus. And so a lot of times people don't have the label, and it's fine not to have the label. The trick is, with this condition, we have such good medication to help get control that it's a shame that if someone thinks their emotions are getting out of order, see your doc. It's time to have someone give you a professional opinion. Don't just talk to friends.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Schwartz, do you find that sometimes the label that Dr. Hibbard mentioned is put on people who aren't necessarily clinically bipolar?
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting you mentioned that, because today I saw a woman who I've been following who's in her late 20s, who's been followed for bipolar for about 5 years by a psychiatrist, who's been on all these medications, lithium, Lamictal, which are heavy-duty psychiatric medication. And what happened to her is that she was cracking her neck, and it turns out that her neck was out of alignment. And I sent her to the chiropractor. The outcome was that her mood improved. And over time, and we've been seeing this over the past couple months, the whole bipolar thing has been on the back burner. So what I wanted to point out was to make sure that you don't assume that somebody's just bipolar because of their mood swings, because there may be so many other causes.
All right, again, a very complex subject to talk about in the short time that we have, but thank you for addressing it. We have another question. This one is for Dr. Stein. Our viewer would like to know if women experience more heart palpitations than men. This viewer feels that sometimes her heart is racing and she's concerned even though she feels well the rest of the time.
So it really depends, I think, on how new it is. Is it increasing in frequency? Are they lasting longer? Does she get dizzy with them? Does she have any other symptoms with them? Is there another reason? Okay, is she emotionally upset? Is there something frightening going on? Is she taking a new medication? Any number of things that are benign can cause this. Serious things, though, do occur. And if they make her symptomatic, where she's losing her balance, where she's losing her attention, if they last a long time and if they last longer, then these are medically diagnosable and treatable conditions, and we've gotten wonderful at taking care of them.
Dr. Hibbard, do you see a lot of that in your emergency room experience, either men or women that come in with heart palpitations and they're afraid they're having a heart attack?
We see a lot of that. That is perhaps one of the most common complaints that people come in to see their doctor for. And by and large, just like the doctor said, there may be medications, there may be even your diet. You may be fueling up on caffeine, coffee, tea, colas, all these unrecognized things that are minor. But amidst these minor things, there are major conditions, and there are great ways we have of monitoring using the event monitor, like the doctor just mentioned, to pick out exactly what is happening. Is this an innocent little extra beat, or is this something more significant like an atrial fibrillation or a more toxic rhythm that may pose a risk to your ability to live normally? I mean, atrial fibrillation has a risk of stroke associated with it, so we do want to know if you have atrial fibrillation and correct it or treat it.
Absolutely. Now, the question is, Dr. Erica, when do we know when to go to the doctor so that we're not seeming that we're hysterical and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack, when it's really just a mood swing?
As women get older and we go into menopause, a lot of changes occur. The more self-awareness we have, the better we'll do. And there are a lot of times that women don't get taken seriously. In the emergency room, nothing against Dr. Hibbert, and also in the hospitals. So women need to learn that they don't have the same presenting symptoms as men, and that also irregular heartbeats are associated palpitations with not just heart disease, but losing their hormones and thyroid problems.
Of course, it's always better to be safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
Dr. Stein tells us that all the time.
Absolutely.
You would agree with that?
Yes, I do. I think, in all fairness, if you have palpitations that are in any way different than what you've had before and they're disturbing you,
seek advice.
See your physician, explain to her or him exactly what is going on, and make sure that you're comfortable that that person is also taking it as seriously as you are.
All right, on that note, we'll take a short break and we'll be back with more right after this. Let's continue answering some of your viewer emails. For Dr. Schwartz, this one asked, my endocrinologist said that because I don't have a thyroid gland, there's no need for me to take iodine, but I'm worried about my breast health. What do you think? Should I take it?
Iodine is actually more important than just for the thyroid, so absolutely it's good for the breast health. But also, your diet is really important. So, you know, if you want to protect your breasts, you want to really be low on caffeine, on processed foods, and you want to actually balance your diet towards organic, healthy foods.
Another one for you says, I had a hysterectomy 2 years ago, and the doctor that did it left me with a long, ugly scar. Is there anything I can do to correct it?
Of course you can. There are a lot of scar revisions is what it's called, and there are plastic surgeons who will do it, even general surgeons who know how to do it. So you don't have to live with an ugly scar. Find a plastic surgeon or a general surgeon who knows how to do it.
A question for Dr. Hibbert. I am 62 and I've been living with MS since the age of 30. Are there specific foods that benefit the nervous system more than others? Can you help this viewer?
I wish I had an answer on diet and MS flares. I'm afraid I really don't have a good answer for that. I mean, we can say that we need fats and we need fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, but as far as affecting the progression of MS, I'm not aware of any dietary. Maybe Erica has some ideas here.
Well, I think that it's really important to stay away from processed foods. And I think that sugar substitutes have been proven to really increase problems with, nerve reactivity. So I think caffeine, alcohol, and staying away from processed foods would be really a good way to stay, healthy in general, and that would actually help you with your MS. Common sense.
While we're on the subject of food, another viewer asked Dr. Stein the best way to cut salt out of a diet and if that's a really good thing for heart health.
So if you have high blood pressure, it's a good thing to cut your salt back. Most of the salt we get is not from a shaker, although obviously you don't want to use a salt shaker a great deal, but is in processed foods that we buy packaged over the counter. And also in restaurants, because salts really do make things taste better.
Of course.
And if you're a very good chef, then you're going to be very generous with your salt. So if you want to cut your salt back, and certainly if you have high blood pressure and a number of other kinds of swellings and edemas, it's a reasonable thing to do. Really try to eat as much in the way of natural foods, foods that you've prepared yourself. Try to avoid packaged foods, even benign things like cereals. When you read the salt content, it's pretty impressive.
So we really, as consumers, have to be an advocate for our own health.
And on every box of a food that's prepared and sold in this country, you will see the salt content. So just take a look at it and then multiply it by how many servings you're having. And look at what percentage that is of what the daily recommended salt is. And you realize most Americans probably hit that by midday. So I think it's worthwhile taking a look at it.
Okay, again, we do have to take responsibility for ourselves. You mentioned if we have high blood pressure to cut that out. What if we don't? What if our numbers are all normal? Can we still have that little dash of salt at the dinner table?
Yes.
Good. I like to hear that.
So it's sort of interesting because the American Heart Association diet, called the DASH diet for hypertension, really does restrict salt somewhat, but presses more to have foods that you get from fruits and vegetables, magnesium and calcium, and the things that seem to lower blood pressure as much as the salt tends to be a potential to raise it.
Okay, Dr. Hibbert, I have a question for you about gout. And it's interesting that one of our viewers actually wrote in because my husband just had a gout attack for the first time in 5 years. Do you think it can be tied to the kind of food that we consume or perhaps too much red wine? Not that I'm saying he had too much.
The diet for gout is really effective to prevent flares. And what we tell people to follow a purine-free diet. And that's we find turkey, red wine, red meat, all these are high in purines, and they'll tend to bring an episode of gout about in someone who's prone to having that. In other words, they have an elevated uric acid already, and when they consume these foods, an attack is more likely.
All right, again, we have to take responsibility for that. Dr. Erica, are hormones perhaps responsible, everything's back
Yes.
to the hormone,
Yes.
for my thinning hair?
Of course. Well, first of all, it could be genetics. The other thing that if you're a woman, I mean, we put so much garbage in our hair with the dyes and with the sprays and with the chemicals in our hair. I'm surprised any of us have any hair on our heads. But besides that, of course, hormones. Low thyroid is actually the most likely culprit if you're talking about hormones. Also, with aging, thinning hair is normal. And there are a lot of vitamins you can take. There are a lot of supplements. Of course, they're hormones. But there's also the idea of eating well and give your hair a little rest. Don't dye it. Don't put a lot of processed products in it.
Okay. One piece of advice that you could give, Dr. Stein, for overall heart health, what would it be?
I think it'd be a combination of two things. I wish I could tell you one, okay? One is, I think, to live a heart-healthy lifestyle, eating natural foods, getting a good deal of physical exercise, not smoking or living in proximity to someone who is smoking a great deal. And the other thing is, there are two issues with heart disease. One is you'd like to prevent it, but then many of us will have heart disease as we grow older, even if we're living perfect lives. So the answer is not to die of it or suffer from it. And in that sense, you really need to be aware of if you have symptoms that are scary, frightening, or new, especially chest pain, palpitations that cause dizziness, extreme shortness of breath, you should seek immediate medical attention. There are uniquely good things we can do now to make you live and die of something besides your heart.
Okay. Dr. Hibbert, our final question for you on this hour is, what various things could cause stomach pain? What would send someone to the emergency room complaining of pain in the stomach?
This is going to take back to our cardiac story. A lot of people think when they've got tummy pain, it is just their tummy. Remember that heart pain can also present as tummy pain. So it isn't always an indigestion that's from something you ate. If you have indigestion and you're not used to having it, let your doctor know immediately or go to the emergency room, because indigestion may be a chest pain equivalent for you if you're in a risk group. So that's the take-home on indigestion. As a general rule, we've got antacids and great acid blockers and all kinds of goodies to take care of acid discomfort. But sometimes acid dyspepsia is not the stomach. Sometimes it's the heart. Sometimes it's acid reflux. And sometimes it's even a gallbladder attack. So I think the key is, if we have indigestion of new onset, stay in tune with your body. If you have new symptoms, seek advice or go to the emergency room and ask for some advice. Don't sit home.
All right, good advice from Dr. Peter Hibbert. Thank you very much. And a question for Dr. Erica. Is it ever too late to get rid of wrinkles? I'm listening.
All right. Well, it's never too early to get rid of wrinkles, first of all.
Okay.
I mean, protect yourself by not sitting in the sun, and that's where everybody was young, because you get the wrinkles 20 years later. So if you don't sit in the sun, don't get sunburned, don't get sun on your face. Look at Nicole Kidman. She doesn't have a wrinkle on her face. I bet you she never sat in the sun. So that's one thing. Then, don't spend your money on all the creams. They're all the same. The ones that you get at CVS or Rite Aid or Walgreens are just as good as the $500 ones. So, there's a lot of stuff you can do about it. And of course, there's Botox, there are fillers, then there's also lasers.
Thank you so much. Great advice as always. That's it for this edition of Meet the Doctors. Please send your questions to our comments page. And if you want a daily dose of health news, click on our health section at newsmax.com. Until the next time, stay happy and healthy. I'm Lynn Doyle for Meet the Doctors.